Hey, I'm Kenya, and I'll share my story of how I survived living in an orphanage. But first, make sure to like this video and hit subscribe. If you do it, the fairy godmother will bless your life with love and money. So I've been living in the orphanage for as long as I can remember. All I know is that my mother is in jail and my dad died in a car accident. Life at the orphanage was normal, but a bit dull. All the children had one dream, which was getting adopted by a nice family. Yet when I was 10, a new manager, Mr. Johnson, took over the orphanage. And let me tell you, we could smell trouble coming just by looking at him. On his first day, he told all the kids to gather in the dining room, and when he did, he made his first announcement with a strict tone. From now on, all rules will be changed. Anyone who does not follow them will be sent to the isolation room. All the children gasped in fear, but I didn't take his words seriously. So I said to Anna, my friend, "He is joking, isn't he?" Then he yelled, "Who said that?" Silence took over the room. No one said anything, but when he threatened one of the girls, she pointed at me. He told me to come forward and stand on the chair. Then he asked one of the teachers to bring some scissors. Then, to my complete horror, he started cutting my long, beautiful blonde hair while saying, "This is what you get for interrupting me. No one should speak in my presence." Tears started falling down my eyes, and all the children were terrified. From that day on, life at the orphanage became horrible. We all felt like prisoners. We had to work for everything, and the only free time we got was the time we went to sleep. The only thing that made it fun was watching my crush Braxton. Braxton was so handsome and cute, but we weren't allowed to talk to each other because Mr. Johnson had a rule of no mixing between boys and girls. But one day, I opened my locker to take some clothes out. To my horror, I found Braxton there. He put his finger on his mouth as a signal for me not to say anything, but I whispered, "What are you doing here?" And he responded, "I broke one of the windows outside and I thought the girls' locker room was the perfect hiding place." I wanted to reply, but we heard someone coming, so Braxton pulled my hand and dragged me inside. It was tight, and we stood across from each other. I felt my face burning and my heart pounding like crazy. Braxton, however, didn't care at all. He was listening carefully. Then our eyes met, and we blushed. He whispered, "I think we can go out." I blushed and said, "Yes, I will go out with you." But he laughed and said, "No, I mean go out of the locker." I responded, "But I'm serious. I would love to go out with you." We got out, and Braxton left through the window. And from that day on, Braxton and I started dating in secret. We started exchanging letters in secret and meeting in the locker where nobody knew where we were. But then the whole thing got exposed when one of the counselors noticed how the two of us were looking at each other. And one time, while we were hugging, she opened the locker's door and said, "Oh, I see what's happening." Braxton and I were caught by surprise. She looked at us angrily and told us to follow her to the office. We sat there waiting for the punishment, but instead she said, "Do you have any idea how much trouble you can get in by doing that?" Braxton and I sat in silence, feeling guilty. She let us out after half an hour of scolding. But when we got out, Braxton had a look of determination on his face. He turned to me and said, "We need to leave this horrible place." I objected. "We are only 16. We are too young. We won't be able to survive." But he insisted, "We can manage. I'm leaving tonight. You have to come with me. Meet me at midnight in the yard." Braxton left me a bit confused. I thought about it all night, but I came to the conclusion that the orphanage would be depressing without him. So at midnight, I packed everything I wanted and met him in the yard. We managed to skip the surveillance cameras and ran away, but we didn't know where to go. We kept walking in the street till morning came. After having breakfast, Braxton suggested that we start looking for a job. We only had $100 that Braxton had managed to steal from one of the counselor's purses. We agreed to meet at the same spot several hours later, and we both went asking for jobs. But unfortunately, no one wanted to hire us because we were too young. At night, we managed to get a room in a motel. "Oh my God, the smell is unbearable in the room," I said, feeling disgusted. Braxton, "Well, it's better than sleeping on the street. You'll get used to it." A week went by with both of us looking for a job. Braxton lied about his age and got a job at a fast food restaurant, but I wasn't as lucky as him. So at the end of that week, Braxton told me, "Hey, Kenya, we need to split up. I can't provide for the both of us anymore." I looked at his face. Braxton was dead serious, but I was enraged. "You made me run away with you, and now you want to give up that easy? What a jerk." I took my things and got out. I can't go back to the orphanage because Mr. Johnson will punish me and I have nowhere to go. I sat on the corner of the street wishing that someone would offer some help. 2 days passed, but nothing happened. I was tired and dirty. I ate only the leftovers people left on restaurant tables. I was exhausted. Then late at night, a good-looking young woman came and asked me, "What are you doing here, young lady?" I burst into tears. She was the first one to speak to me in 2 days. I responded, "I have no one. I'm homeless." She felt sorry for me, but then she asked, "I'm Carmen. I live on my own. I would love to have some company. Would you like to live with me?" I couldn't resist her offer. I needed help, so I immediately said yes. The woman took me to her house. She offered me some food, and I ate like a savage girl. She showed me to my room, and I slept like a baby. However, the next day over breakfast, she said, "You can't just live here for free. You have to work for it." I looked at her with a surprised look on my face, but she continued, "Don't worry, it's a cleaning business. I clean rich people's houses and get paid for it. I'll pay you, of course." The whole thing looked tempting. I'll work and get some money. It doesn't seem so bad. But that's not what happened. On our first cleaning day, we went to this magnificent mansion. The owner gave the keys to Carmen and then went to play some golf. Carmen took some cleaning tools out and told me to sweep the floor while she went checking the rooms. I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I couldn't stop her. I kept cleaning silently. At the end of the day, the owner came back and handed Carmen $1,000. On our way home, Carmen took $200 and gave it to me and said, "You've earned this." I looked at her with pure aversion. Carmen didn't help me at all. She left me to clean all by myself. I deserved half of that $1,000. But I was too exhausted to say anything, so I kept my mouth shut. But this kept on happening. I'd die cleaning those houses, and Carmen would get paid for us both. I also noticed that she would hide things in her little bag. One time, when she was checking a painting on the wall, I opened the bag and noticed a diamond ring. I gasped and closed the bag as fast as I could. That night, I made my decision to steal. If I want to live a better life, I need to start making money. If Carmen does it, then I can do it too. So I started stealing small things from the houses. Little pieces of jewelry, small wooden antiques, and expensive gold pens. But I didn't keep them with me. I sold them by going to antique stores. I hid the money I got in a private place, and I showed Carmen that I was grateful for her hospitality, so she didn't suspect me. Things went like that for 2 years, until one night, we heard someone knock on the door. Carmen went to answer. It was the police. I shivered as the officer told her that she was under arrest. The owner of the last house we visited had caught her on camera stealing his wife's jewelry. When they left, I couldn't sit still. I packed my bags and got my money out. I decided to move out. I rented a tiny apartment for me and got back to working as the main cleaning lady. I mean, I knew all our clients, and now they would pay me good money that I wouldn't have to steal. And because I was so good at cleaning, I started getting more clients. One of them was called Robin. Robin was in his 20s, and he was so hot. Whenever he was in the house, I couldn't take my eyes off him. There was one problem, though. He was married. Weeks passed with me watching him. At first, he seemed like he didn't care. But then one afternoon while I was cleaning the kitchen, he came in and said, "I know how you are feeling. I feel the same way too." I blushed and looked at him and said, "Oh, really?" He didn't answer. He just came and kissed me. Robin and I started dating in secret, and I thought that it was not that bad to steal from his house. After all, he was enjoying my company. Plus, he had rare, expensive antiques. I stole a few and sold them. Robin was rich. But he was not dumb. Soon he found what I had done and yelled at me. "How dare you steal these things? We pay you good money." I panicked, so I said, "You know, I'm pregnant with your baby." His face went white. He totally believed me, so I made my second strike. "If you want to get me out of your life, you need to pay $2 million. Robin was scared. He clearly didn't want to ruin his relationship with his wife, so he said, "Okay, fine, but you won't work here anymore. You are fired." I responded, "I couldn't care less about working for you. I just need the money. I'll send you my bank account." So Robin started sending me money month by month. I was not pregnant, but I had to fake. I photoshopped some pregnancy photos and sent them to Robin. He kept messaging me, "I don't want anything to do with you or with the baby." When it was time for me to give birth to my fake baby, I offered my neighbor to babysit her newborn. She was surprised, but she agreed quickly because she had errands to do. I took the newborn baby and went to Robin's workplace. He was nervous when he saw me. He told me to meet him in the parking lot so no one could see us. Robin said, "What are you doing here? I paid you everything you asked for." I responded confidently. The baby and I need a house to live in. I can't stay in that old dusty little apartment. Robin's face turned red. He was angry. But this time he said, I'll get you the house, but you will sign papers that release me from any further responsibilities. I will also get a restraining order against you. You'll no longer come near me or my house. I smiled and said, cool. And so Robin bought me a house outside the city in one of the nicest neighborhoods. I was beyond happy. I had a house and a lifetime of savings. I couldn't ask for more. But then 3 years later, while I was shopping for groceries, I heard a familiar voice saying, "Oh my God, Kenya, is that you?" I turned around and it was Braxton. He was taller, bigger, and extremely hot. All my feelings came rushing towards him. I forgot what he did to me and I ran to hug him. I said with pure excitement, "Oh my God, Braxton, I miss you." Braxton looked impressed by my appearance. I could tell that he fell in love with me. We started talking and I invited him over to my house. I had to know what happened to him. However, Braxton was not as lucky or as smart as I was. He was still poor, barely making it from month to month. "Don't worry, Braxton. You can stay here with me in this house. We can live together." Braxton was over the moon. He thanked me and then he asked, "So how did you end up like this?" I told him the whole story and he was proud of me. Braxton and I started living together, but it was not long until he asked me to marry him. I couldn't say no. I loved him from the bottom of my heart. We got married in a small ceremony. I was so happy, but later I started to get worried because I couldn't have a baby. We tried so much, but it didn't work. And when we got to the doctor, he told me the biggest shock of my life. "I'm sorry, but it seems that you can't have kids." I felt the world crashing down. I loved kids. I want to hold a baby of my own. When we got home, Braxton wasn't himself, so I asked, "What's wrong?" And he responded, "Maybe we can't have kids because of what you did. Don't you think it's a punishment?" I felt my blood boil. Was he judging me now? I left and went to my room. I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. When morning came, I had already made my decision. I told him over breakfast, "I think you are right. I've done such horrible things. I'll donate half of my money to the orphanage. They need it." Braxton smiled and said, "I'll make sure they receive it." I wrote a check and gave it to Braxton. I didn't want to go with him. The orphanage brought bad memories. I decided to wait for him in the house. I waited and waited, but Braxton never came back. I tried calling him multiple times, but his phone was out of reach. Where the hell did he go? I waited for Braxton 2 more days, but he never came back. I realized that he'd stolen the check and ran away. I felt so stupid, but that wasn't it. When I looked through his stuff to try and find something that might lead me to where he was hiding, I noticed 2 packs of pregnancy pills. He was giving them to me so I wouldn't get pregnant. That's why he was so determined to give me a glass of water before going to bed every day. I fell on the ground out of despair. 15 years later, I'm now 38. I lost everything I had because I got addicted to gambling. I'm so pathetic that no one wants to marry me. I'm thinking of becoming a nun and helping the orphans. Or maybe steal Mr. Johnson and take all of his money. Who knows what this head might come up with.
I could not believe it was finally happening. I was going to meet my mom. The hospital called at 3:30 in the morning to tell my dad that my mom had finally woken up and was asking for him. I know this sounds crazy, but my mom's been in a coma since I was born. I literally put her in a coma, and she hadn't woken up once in 14 years. Until this morning. My dad burst into my room, almost knocking my lamp over on my bedside table. I startled awake, and before I could even open my eyes all the way, he said, "She's awake!" Before I continue my story, I just want to remind you to like and subscribe to My Story Animated to hear more craziness like what you are about to witness. At first, I thought he was talking about me, and I was about to yell at him for waking me up. But then I realized what he meant. My mom was awake. My mom! I never heard her voice in real life. I never seen her eyes look into mine. I've held her hand, but she's never held mine. She's been here the whole time, but she has been so far away, too. She had had a complicated pregnancy with me. I was a stubborn fetus, I guess you could say. I decided that I wanted to come early, which caused a lot of issues for her, and she was rushed into surgery to get me out. She never regained consciousness after she was put under anesthesia, and because of her family's beliefs, my father never took her off the meds that kept her alive. I'd always had a feeling that at some point, I would have to be the one to end my mom's life. But thankfully, it didn't sound like that was going to happen after all. I bolted out of bed and ran to get my brother up. He was 2 years older than me, so he only remembers small fragments of Mom in real life. He remembers her singing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star every night, and she made the best chocolate chip pancakes in the world. The sad thing is, he doesn't remember her smile or the way she smelled. So this day was the best news for all of us. My brother never said it out loud, but I knew that he blamed me for what happened to our mom. And to be honest, I didn't expect any less. He was nice to me growing up, but I always felt like there was something between us that wouldn't allow us to get closer. He hadn't forgiven me. Did you know the longest time someone has been in a coma was 19 years? Terry Wallace was in a coma for many years before he woke up on June 11, 2003. The ride to the hospital seemed to last forever, and we all rushed in as soon as my dad got the car in park. Our happy reunion was cut short when the doctor stopped us outside of my mom's room. He had a grave look on his face. Something was wrong. "She wants to see Emma," the doctor said, and my dad pulled me forward. He said no problem and tried to get the doctor to open the door. "No, see," the doctor started. "She doesn't understand that Emma is a teenager now. She thinks that she just gave birth to her several hours ago." I think all of our faces turned white. Of course, we had thought this could happen, but we didn't know what to do when it finally came to be. The doctor told my dad that he didn't want to shock my mother until we were all here at the hospital with her, and we could introduce me. This wasn't going to be easy, and we all knew that. I held my breath as my dad and the doctor went into my mother's room. All I could hear was some muffled talking from the doctor and my dad. Then my mom started to scream uncontrollably. "Bring me my baby!" I got goosebumps up and down my arms. This was probably the most afraid that I've ever been in my life. I was so afraid that my mother was going to hate me and that she was going to think I ruined her life too. I almost ran out of the hospital, but my brother nudged me forward. The door to the hospital room stood open in front of me, and I walked through. I had never seen my mom with her eyes open. She already looked so much more full of life than she had just days ago. "Hi, Mom," I said, twirling my fingers through my hair. I did that when I was nervous. My mom was doing the same with hers, as she said, "Hi." My dad said that it was okay to step closer. I couldn't help but start to cry as I walked up to my mom. She had the same hair color as me, and her eyes were just as blue. My dad had always told me I looked like her, but I never could see it until now. In that moment, I felt like my mom had come back from the dead. I know she'd been here this whole time, but she was as good as gone. I touched her face and her eyes lit up. It's like she knew it was me. It's like she remembered my soul when she carried me in her stomach. "It is you," she said, and she wrapped me in a humongous hug. We bawled together on the bed for quite some time. Then my mom pulled away from me and wiped her tears. "It's so nice to finally meet you. The last time I saw you, you were on a black and white screen," she chuckled, talking about the sonogram. "I've grown since then," I giggled, and wrapped my hand around hers. Since Mom had been in bed for so long, most of her muscles were weakened. She'd need lots of physical therapy to get them back into shape. She wouldn't be able to leave the hospital for a couple of weeks, maybe even a month. And when she did leave, she would still be required to do lots of physical therapy and other therapies, I guess. Those other therapies would help her deal with all the time that had passed and missing out on our lives and things like that. The one thing we didn't know how to tell her was that our dad was remarried. We'd had a stepmom for the last 3 years. My brother and I had given our dad our blessing to start dating again after the 10-year anniversary of when my mom went into a coma. He'd been so lonely. He'd basically only lived for us, and having someone there to help with the kids would be amazing too. We decided we weren't going to tell my mom that first day. We thought it would be too much to add to everything else that was going on. On the ride home, my brother blurted out that he didn't think we should tell Mom at all. He thought we should make our stepmom move out, which I didn't think was such a bad idea either. Our dad wasn't going for that. He hadn't fallen out of love with my mom. He'd just become stagnant. And the fact that she was awake now seemed to be weighing heavy on his mind. He was silent almost the entire ride home. When we pulled into the driveway, I asked if he was okay. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said he just didn't know what to do. We walked into the house and gave each other the biggest hugs. Our stepmom walked up and asked if we were okay. She knew what had happened and all of the craziness that was now going to continue. Except she thought that my dad didn't love my mom anymore and that they were actually divorced, when in fact, he'd never divorced our mom in the first place. This was going to be hell for sure. Later on that night, while my brother and I were supposed to be sleeping, we snuck down the stairway to listen to my dad and stepmom talking in the kitchen. "So what are we going to do?" my stepmom was asking. My dad was silent when she continued, saying that obviously we would need to contact my mom's family and have them help out. My dad said we were her family, and she would stay with us. My stepmom hated that idea and suggested that we get a hotel room for her until we could figure something out. That's when he dropped the bomb. "We're still married," he blurted. My stepmom nodded. "Yes, we are, and I have every right to say what happens in this house." He gave my stepmom the side eye and said, "No, I mean that I'm still married to her." "So we aren't even legally married?" My dad shook his head. I could tell he was crying again. My stepmom let out the biggest scream I'd ever heard. I think it blew out my eardrums. With ears ringing, my brother and I rushed down the stairs when my stepmom was slinging horrible words at my father, her face in a red rage. Her things were packed within a few hours, and she was off to her sister's house. I could tell my dad was hurt, but he looked almost relieved as well. By the end of the week, my mom was ready to come home. We set up the guest room for her, but we were surprised when she came in the house and went directly to the master bedroom. My dad didn't say anything, but my brother spoke up. He told her to put her things in the guest room, and she looked hurt. "It's okay, Mom. You can sleep in the master bedroom tonight," I tried to assure her. "Tonight? It's my bed, my house." She looked confused and worried. Then she asked where our stepmom was. We told her she left, and I don't know if I saw relief on her face or terror. We all helped her get settled in the bed, and she took a nap while we discussed how we were going to introduce my stepmom to my mom. However, not long after, our stepmom came to the door and knocked loudly, waking my mom up. My brother answered the door, and in a hushed tone, he told her to be quiet. Just as the door shut again, my mom was on the landing of the stairs. "Everything okay?" she asked, and came down the stairs, coming face to face with my stepmom. "Mom, this is Lisa," I said, stepping forward. Lisa crossed her arms as my mom put her hand out. Realizing that Lisa wasn't going to shake her hand, my mom put hers back at her side. She offered Lisa to come on in, and Lisa snidely replied, "I don't need to be invited into my own home." I guess it just shows the type of person my mom is, but she didn't reply with something nasty and rude. She graciously smiled and offered Lisa some tea. Then she said, "We can all call this place home." Lisa scoffed. That's when my mom almost lost her cool. Instead of flipping out and yelling at Lisa, she stirred the sugar in her tea and quietly said, "You're not the one who had their entire life ripped away from them, so I don't know what you're so upset about." "You're taking my husband away," was all Lisa could muster. My mom reminded Lisa that she had actually taken her husband away first. She also said that it was extremely upsetting that Lisa got to watch her children grow up a little while she lay unconscious in a hospital bed. That's when Lisa jumped up and spilled hot tea all over my mom. I quickly sprang into action, as did my brother. I grabbed a towel to help my mom dry off. Luckily, the tea had some milk and sugar in it, so it wasn't scalding, and my brother pulled Lisa away, shoving her out the door while simultaneously screaming for our dad. He ran down the stairs like lightning. "What is it? What's going on?" he asked. We explained what happened, and my dad took off out the door after Lisa. I helped my mom up the stairs, and we got her in the shower to get the tea off of her. Then we heard shouting outside. My stepmom and dad were back. All we could hear was Lisa screaming that my dad lied to her, and there was nothing he could do to get her to forgive him. I was hoping she would leave, but she came into the house and shoved herself into the master bedroom right past my mom. I asked Lisa if she could have some respect for my mom who was changing, but she snarled at me and started stuffing a bag full of clothes. "I'm out of here. Don't bother calling me," she said to my dad as she quickly left again. Over the next few days, my dad tried calling her, but she wouldn't answer. He tried to get a hold of her sister, parents, and everyone else that would know where she was, but no one would give him any clues. During that time, he was also taking care of my mom, driving her to some appointments and making her food when she was hungry. My brother and I were busy with school, so thankfully, he was able to keep her company. A couple weeks after the crazy incident with Lisa, my brother and I came home to see our parents sitting on the couch together, my mom's feet across my dad's thighs. I couldn't believe the sight. When we came in the door, the two looked as if we caught them doing something wrong. They blushed and tried to scramble away from each other. My brother and I burst out laughing. They were married after all. We didn't mind that they wanted to get closer. It had been almost 15 years since they'd been able to do that. That was the moment we thought that we had our mom back. She was still pretty weak and often didn't understand how to use technology, but she was smiling more and cracking jokes. Her and I talked a lot more too, and I told her about almost everything that I've done in my life to catch her up. We cried a lot, and I held her while she apologized for not being around. Then things started to get strange. She'd wake up very early in the morning and turn on all the burners on the stove. The refrigerator door would be wide open, and the house would smell like gas fumes when we woke up in the morning. The last time that this happened, she was sitting out on the porch while everything in the kitchen was running, including the sink and the microwave. The back door was left open, and I saw her curled in a ball. I walked out of the door and asked her if she was okay. She didn't answer. I sat down next to my mom and put my arm around her. When she looked at me, all I could see was pure terror in her eyes. "Who are you?" she asked and pulled away from me. I looked at her utterly confused. "I'm your daughter, Emma." "No, my daughter is a baby. I just had her a couple of months ago. Who are you and why are you in my house?" "Dad?" I called, and it took a few minutes, but he showed up on the doorstep. "Something's wrong with Mom," is all I could say before she grabbed my hair and pulled my head back. She started screaming, "Where is my daughter?" And my dad grabbed her, pulling her arms behind her back. It was then that she snapped out of whatever trance she was in. She started crying and saying, "I'm sorry, Emma." I ran upstairs and locked my door. To say I was terrified would be an understatement. Something was going on with my mom, and we needed to figure it out. My dad called the hospital, and they told him she may have had some memory lapses. But this was way more severe than a slip of the mind. She physically hurt me. And she's a very small woman. There was something else going on here. I spent the next several days trying to keep my distance from her. She apologized to me several times after the incident on the porch, but I was still afraid to get close to her. My father and brother had no problem accepting her back into the family. They would play board games and watch movies together, but every time that I would join in, I could tell that a dark mask fell over my mom's face. She would constantly stare at me out of the corner of her eye, and I swear I could see a red glint flash over her normally bright eyes whenever she didn't think I was looking. Then, one night, I woke up to her staring at me from across my bedroom. I popped up in my bed and asked her if she was okay. She didn't reply, but I could see her eyes in the darkness. They weren't right. I screamed for my dad again, and when he came in the room, he flipped on the light. She wasn't in the chair anymore. We searched for her everywhere in the house, but she wasn't anywhere we could see. That's when we heard the blood-curdling scream. Tune in next time to hear what happened with my mom in the woods.